Alrighty, folks. Thanks for checking out this video. James Cards FC here, of course. And today on the second edition and the September edition of the Fireside Chat, I'm joined by Seth, obviously from Soccer Card Corner. Really enjoy his content. He's been on the channel once before, and I've appeared on his channel once as well. So if you haven't checked him out by now, please go ahead and do so. But Seth, for those of the people that do not know you, feel free to give like a short introduction before we get started here.
Sure. Yeah, name's Seth. Channel is Soccer Card Corner. Providing soccer card market content, mostly based around a bankroll building challenge, as well as just some other, analytic deep dive, theory-based type of stuff that I find myself interested in digging into and then sharing with my audience. So yeah, happy to be on again.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having you. When we have these more, or at least when I have these more free-form sort of topics, I actually think it's even harder to do it by yourself when you don't have as many notes and a presentation to look to. When it's sort of just me staring into a screen, it's a lot more difficult for me to come up with engaging conversation with myself and my non-existent audience that I can't really see. So it's nice to have somebody that I can actually speak thoughts to and they can speak back. And we'll have a little discussion today on some topics that have come up throughout the month of September, and then look forward to what we think we might see in October as we move forward, of course, into the World Cup coming up in November and December. So without further ado, I wanted to start off with this as an opener. Is there anything more annoying in the market than you watching a club or watching some matches, finding a player, going and looking them up on Transfer Market, thinking you have found this diamond in the rough, and you go to eBay and he has no cards? Is there anything more frustrating than
that? Maybe the only thing more frustrating is finding a player, finding that they have like one card, and then seeing that they're in the next 5 sets. That might be the only other frustrating
thing. That's the double whammy right there. So that perfectly describes my look at Mudryk for Shakhtar right now, because he was super hot in the preseason for Shakhtar. He looked incredible, and obviously he's continued that round of form into the Champions League. And so all he had going into Champions League was a 2022 Adrenaline FIFA 365 release. That was his only card. Then he got put in Tops Now. And since all of that is 2022 product, that also means he will be in 2022 Topps Chrome, 2022 Topps Chrome Sapphire, 2022 Finest, go down the list. He will be in every single set. And so now there's really no scarcity argument I can make for buying any Mudryk cards. And it's very disappointing as probably the one and only and therefore biggest Shakhtar supporter in the United States. It is a sour note for myself.
It kind of reminds me of the guy from, is it Napoli? I can't even pronounce his name, like the Kvaratskhelia Klava. I was like, dang, this guy's good, and he's super young. I did the same thing, and it's like he's got to be in something and nothing, which then makes you know that okay, he's going to be in every set next year.
I believe he has one really small release that has already gotten super expensive, and now he will be in every single product in the next year. So there are 2 guys that will be very expensive going in next year, and unfortunately, if I deem it worthy to pick up any of their cards, it's going to cost me a lot more than it should have cost me because I knew of them in advance. So that is a frustrating thing that happens. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things you got to roll the punches on and move on to the next guy, like a Matthias Tell, for example, where he just happens to be in one set. And I guess we'll start with that topic. So Tell really burst onto the scene with Bayern Munich. He's started actually a few games for them, and he has a couple goals, one in their regional tournament in the Bundesliga and one in the actual Bundesliga itself. So he comes out in the Merlin product. It's going to be his only 2021 year product that we know of. He has got parallels. It's a limited print run. He's only going to have 3,600 refractors and about 1,800 numbered cards. And so when they first hit the market, they were going for obscene prices. Refractors were $80. Now they're down to more in the $15 to $20 range. And numbered stuff that was going for thousands is now going for hundreds. So I think that does a good job of explaining to people that even if there's a lot of mania and a lot of hype going into one of these new sets, you really don't have to be the first one to buy it. Give it a couple weeks, prices will come down. But with that being said, I think he presents an interesting play for people that want to gamble. I think on the gambling side, when there's scarcity, I'm a bigger fan of it just due to the fact that you do have that scarcity that a lot of guys like Gavi, for example, will not have. So what are your thoughts on the whole Tell situation, how his pricing got so crazy and now it seems to be cooling down a little? How do you sort of read into not just him, but the market in general when it comes to these kind of situations?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, I think this is kind of what we wait for, which is these sets where, because like Topps Chrome, you're like, oh, here's all the rookies. And they're getting, like 90% of those guys are going to be in like Top Stadium Club. They're going to be in, you know, like every set. It's like, it's really just a game of like which guys are in which sets, but not others. And so then you get the set where it's got like the 12 guys that are in nothing else. And then everyone kind of rushes to that. And it, you know, I don't want to say like inflates the prices. I mean, it does inflate the prices, but for good reason. And then the game almost becomes like, well, is this inflated price where it's almost like making you make a bigger bet on the guy that you identified as like, oh, this is a scarce rookie card, but now I need to make an even bigger bet on. It almost increases the variance, right? It's kind of like it's basically like the Darwin Nunez situation all over again. If we had already known Darwin Nunez was like getting transferred to Liverpool, and then everybody's rushing to those cards. And now it's like everybody's trying to find the Darwin Nunez before the Darwin Nunez. And we're basically playing this game of like, okay, we're going to spend hundreds of dollars on these cards of this kid who like barely plays, but like everyone's super hyped on him. And yeah, it's just like, it's frustrating in the sense that it's like, it kind of not defeats the purpose, but almost like it doesn't make it as fun to find the prospects because everybody else is finding them. But on the flip side, like one thing I've been thinking about is like, okay, I'm kind of like missing the boat here to some extent. So like, how do I then think like, what's everybody else not focused on right now? Like, that's kind of what it has me thinking about. I don't have the answer to that, but that's kind of like how I start thinking about, you know, this sort of situation.
Yeah, I think now that the Darwin Nunez example is now out in public and out in thought, and people, not only my own channel, but other channels as well, talked about the fact, well, Darwin Nunez is only in one set, so his market cap gets pretty ridiculous when you think about the fact that he only has X amount of serial numbered cards, and so it justifies the price of it. Now I think everybody has that in the front of their mind, and they're doing what I would do normally in a checklist and say, who are the rookies that don't have cards in other sets? You check those down, and prices are starting to get pretty crazy on those guys. And so I think where that was a potential play in the past is not so much a play as it used to be. I still like it longer run, but it used to be something where you could get some really explosive growth really quickly if they did catch on and nobody else noticed. But now everyone seems to be eyeing that with a magnifying glass. So even if Tell does perform really well, I think it'll be very, very difficult for his prices to get back to where they were when it initially dropped. Because even though, yes, the print run is very limited, a lot of supply hits the market when these boxes get broken. And so I think people misinterpreted how short print this short print is. It's not like Darwin Nunez where he has a few hundred numbered parallels. Tell is going to have 1,800 numbered parallels and 3,600 refractors. So it's limited compared to Gavi, but it is not limited compared to a guy like Darwin Nunez.
Yeah, and it kind of takes out like the performance aspect because it's like we're speculating before the performance happens. So now, like I said, we're just making like a bigger bet without as much information, which, you know, that's a game that we can play, but it is also one that I guess we have to adapt to some extent.
Yeah, it's all a big gamble that looked a lot more appealing on the surface, but now that more people are sort of playing this sort of strategy, I think it's becoming less and less appealing, and maybe it's time to sort of go back to the drawing board on prospecting and maybe come up with something else. But maybe a video for another time there. Something else I wanted to address just quickly is the FIFA release just came out, at least for early access, and for degenerates like me that play the game days in advance, and you get on Ultimate Team and you spend 5 or 6 hours a day just looking at transfer market screens. It really hit me today just how much activity there is on there compared to what we see in the sports card market. So if I go on the FIFA market right now for Ultimate Team on Transfer Market, just on PlayStation, there's 5 million plus card listings right now. And like, sure, half of those are completely overpriced and won't sell, but there's a few million cards being transacted every hour. Like, and that's a crazy number to think about in comparison where we are right now. If we just got a fraction of that audience to get into the cards that we get into on the physical side, it would do crazy things for this market. So I just see that as massive potential, not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think eventually something has to be a connection point there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was USMNT Soccer Cards had a great video that was kind of like bridging the gap between FIFA and the card market. And we had a bit of a back and forth in the comments about like EA is missing this golden opportunity to basically, I mean, whether it's NFTs or whether it's like something where it's like, hey, all these people are transacting on your server and they're spending all this money in these, you know, on these Ultimate Team, you know, cards or these players. There's clearly a missed opportunity here to like bridge the gap to like the sports card market. And whether it's, like I said, an NFT that is like redeemable for some sort of like physical card, but like, yeah, to your point, there's clearly like an interest in this type of market and collectible. And the problem with FIFA is that every year it kind of resets. And like the soccer card market doesn't reset, but I guess the problem, especially if you think maybe like the younger generation, is that it's all physical and none of it's digital. And, and it's like, how do we sort of bridge that physical gap with the, where a lot of people are spending their time digitally and online and things like that.
Yeah, and I would hope Fanatics, when they take over the sports card world over the next few years, figures out how to bridge that gap. They definitely have the money and I think the savviness to do so, especially on the tech side with what they do. So I would love it if they found a way to partnership somehow with EA. I don't know how it would look like, but I just really think that makes a ton of sense for them going forward.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think I have to imagine for a company like EA, like with FIFA being as global and as popular as it is, like they have to at least have somebody like, in some lab somewhere, like thinking about it, like what are the potential like use cases and what are like potential products. So hopefully, something at some point. And yeah, like you said, maybe once Fanatics kind of steps in and takes over.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on, because that's just another huge potential market that could bleed into this and you only need a small fraction of it. Speaking again on our side of the market and the physical side, I wanted to do a quick recap of stock up, stock down for September. I just went through Card Ladder and looked at PSA 10 prices. They're limited in terms of their soccer, but you can still get a pretty good idea. And obviously the guy that is stock up in the most mainstream fashion is going to be Erling Haaland, a guy that we talked about going into the season, that I then did a follow-up video on when his pricing got really, really crazy at the start of September. He scored a couple hat tricks, I believe, in a row, and his prices went up 150% over a week. Over the month of September, they're more like up 30%. So they had that big spike, and a lot of them are cooling much back down to where they were previously. The finest in PSA 10, for example, I think is only up 15 or 20% since the start of the month. So things are cooling down on Haaland. It's not like he's playing any worse. It's just international break happens. More people come to the spotlight. People forget about Haaland, but that's just bound to happen in the modern market. It's really hard to keep that sort of pricing velocity and attention for a long time horizon. And so we see that even with this ridiculous September that he's had, he's only up about 30% on most cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time we talked about Haaland, I was like, what would he have to do? Like score 70 goals and
essentially that's what he is doing. Yeah.
he's gonna do it. It's insane. I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like at least my approach to the market is I find it difficult to justify paying like hyped up prices for players, because it's kind of like, like I always ask myself, like, what would somebody have to do to justify these prices, right? And like, if that thing seems unrealistic, it's really hard for me to get there. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it just seemed unrealistic. And then after like 3 weeks, he was just like, yeah, I'm on pace for that. So it's like, I mean, that guy's unreal. Like, I don't understand. I mean, that guy can score in like so many different ways against like any team. It's more a matter of like if and not when, or sorry, when and not if, where it's like he's gonna just get his. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can only imagine once things get back, especially I assume City's gonna win the Premier League. And I'm sure, one of these years, if not this year, they'll make a run in the Champions League. And I would imagine he's going to have a pretty big part in that. And if and when that happens, that's going to be, I imagine those prices will probably continue to at least, trickle up at least a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're at the point in Haaland's market where, similar to what I was saying going into this season, and if you ignore that giant spike that happened, because realistically only 2 or 3 people really capitalized at the peak of that, and most people are up around 30% as opposed to 150%. But the point about Haaland is you're really waiting for the market itself to expand in participants more than you're waiting on Haaland to score 50 to 70 goals, because a 30% increase is great, but once you factor in your eBay fees and all that kind of stuff going on, you're looking at making 10, 15%. So really, to get that big sort of growth you're looking for on Haaland, and I'm expecting the people that are in on Haaland are in this with a more long-term view, you're really waiting on more people to enter the market, because we're very limited right now in how much velocity we can take. So I think, like you say, Haaland is incredible. He's amazing. This might be a good buying window right now that things have cooled back down for a bit. But I think, again, he's more of a longer term guy, and it's going to be a matter of if you can pick what those 2 or 3 sets are going to be that people are going to want over the next few years. It's no easy task, but yeah, I think that's the play on Haaland more than it is playing these sort of quick flip things where you really, really have to be fortunate with your timing more than anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. I think, if you are long on Haaland, it is interesting that at least in the near term, with his national team not really factoring into a lot of national competitions, there will be these windows where he's sort of not doing anything, and maybe the market forgets about him, and those actually could potentially be buying opportunities. But yeah, I mean, yeah, 30% in a month is great, but it's like 30% month over month is not sustainable. So eventually that percentage, even if it keeps going up, then we're talking about like 20%, 15%, 8%, right? Like eventually it's like the growth can't sustain into perpetuity. So yeah, I agree. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting because it seems like he, at least out of anybody in the modern, ultra modern sort of, prospect market, is as well positioned as anyone to sort of be the next, quote unquote GOAT. And he's obviously so young still. So it's like there's a lot can play out still, but it's interesting to kind of see it developing and see the people, see people positioning themselves accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was really the point I was trying to get to with my video that I put out on him. When you see these 100 to 150% increases, it's probably a good time in the near term to get out and then buy yourself back in, because we are going to see lulls in any player's market. It could be Mbappe. Even when he plays in international tournaments, there's going to be lulls where Mbappe is not all that popular. It just happens. Not everybody's going to be on the top of mind at all times. So when the guy is top of mind, it's not a bad idea to sell things and you can always buy them back. I think that's the lesson that not a lot of people take too much. It's, oh, I sold this, I can never get it back. No, the majority of the time you can, unless you're dealing in the 1 of 1, 1 of 10 sort of range, which I don't think too many people are actually playing in. But moving down the list of guys on Stock Up, just one more I wanted to highlight as I was going through Card Ladder. I noticed that Alphonso Davies' 2018 Optic in PSA 10 was up 20%. Now, Davies hasn't really seen much of the spotlight, but I look at that as more of something where people are saying, hey, he could be a pretty big star at the World Cup given the CONCACAF connection and to the market. So 20% up on Davies is pretty interesting there. On the other side, going down, we have Jadon Sancho down another 30% this month, as on top of the fact that he's down, I believe, 90% from his peak on his Chrome Refractor. So huge falls for Jadon Sancho as he continues to sort of be missing at Manchester United. They're bringing in new players and he's not getting as many minutes as you would hope, although he is starting a bit. He's just not the impact guy that he was at Dortmund. And so every time a new player comes up, that's more spotlight going away from Jadon Sancho. And this is a perfect example of what can happen when a prospect just loses hype and falls out of the spotlight, because there's always just going to be another guy behind them. And then one more to touch on would be Christian Pulisic. Most of his stuff is flat to down a little bit, but I did see his silver 2016 and PSA 10 took a big drop of 30 to 40% on a PWCC auction. That is actually one of the key cards in his market. I believe the PSA 10 population is between 30 and 40. So to see that take such a big drop is surprising, but given the United States men's national team lack of excitement that seems to be going on right now, I guess not too unsurprising.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Pulisic, he's got a lot of things going on in terms of his club situation as well as obviously the national team. I mean, I would say if you're bullish on the U.S. men's national team, this probably seems like a good time to check out some prices because it's not looking too hot right now. The interesting thing about Alphonso Davies. So I had a bunch of Donruss cards from years ago where I ended up like grading some, and I finally got it back after a year, and I sold just like a base Donruss PSA 10 for like $125. Like it was way more than I thought it would be. And I sold it to somebody in Canada. And I think there's a pretty hyped like Canadian market, obviously, for Alphonso Davies. And one thing I've also noticed, and I don't know if this was an error, but I was looking at Canada, one of Canada's friendlies that they were playing recently, and it had him as a left winger, like more attacking, whereas like he plays left, I believe he plays left back for his club team. So that's another thing to look at, where like some of these guys who are maybe used differently for their national teams, especially if Canada goes and makes some noise at the World Cup, you would think, him and Jonathan David and some of the others would factor into that. That could be an interesting thing to look at as well. Whereas, him on his club team, he's one of many great players and maybe gets buried a little bit. And exactly what you're saying with Jadon Sancho, it's like when these guys play for these big teams, a loss of form is they just kind of get replaced by the next hyped up guy. And it's hard to kind of break out of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Davies point is a good one as well. He does play more of an attacking role when he does play for Canada. And I wish the US would do things like that, where you put your best players in positions to impact the game the most. But I guess that's up to the manager at that point. We won't get too far down the rabbit hole of the United States men's national team and their current issues. But I did want to do a quick buy, sell, hold on some US men's national team guys. And so I formulated this in a way that gives a little more context to the buy, sell, and hold than we're probably used to. So I'm going to give you the option. You have buy and hold through the World Cup as of right now. You have buy now and try and sell before the World Cup. And then you have buy and sell during the World Cup. So you have three different categories. You got to buy one guy and you got to hold him through the whole World Cup. You got to buy one guy and sell him during the tournament. And you have to buy one guy and sell him before the tournament. Who are you picking for each of those categories?
I think, okay, so for the guy that I'm going to buy and sell before the World Cup, it might be too late to buy and sell it though. I was going to say Brendan Aronson, just because he's been pretty hyped lately, and he's been, he had a couple pretty, great moments with Leeds, and is getting a lot of steam as far as being, one of the wingers on the World Cup team. I think another one to look for in that category is maybe Josh Sargent. If he somehow wins the, gets named as the striker role, there could be some hype behind him. I think those are more like short term. I think buy and hold, and this hurts me, but I would probably say Gio Reyna, only because I'm not really sure with his injury situation. Like, if he gets hurt during the World Cup or before the World Cup, and there's always that risk, right? And then you kind of have to hold. I think Pulisic is maybe like the buy and sell during the World Cup, especially given the drop that you mentioned. And thinking that like he hasn't really done much on his club team. If the US does anything at the World Cup, you have to imagine he's at least involved in a lot of the scoring opportunities, if not scoring the goals themselves. So I kind of like Pulisic. I would say one of my other buy and holds, just because I'm a pretty big fanboy, is Yunus Musa, although I realize he's not as involved in like scoring as much as he's just like a dominant like midfield player. But I don't know. Those are kind of my top of mind thoughts there. What about you?
Yeah, so I actually had Yunus Musa as the guy to buy now and then sell during the tournament, because I don't think a lot of people have him on their radar as a guy that's a real X factor. But I mean, you see it in the friendly matches. Not having him in the squad makes a huge difference. And Berhalter has been very high in praising him. It sounds like his teammates are very high on him as well. From what the reports are in training, he looks really, really good with the team. And it's evident without him that they are a level down of what they are when they do have him. So I think he's a guy that could have a few good matches, and based on where his pricing is now and how few cards he does have graded, I think he does have a good position to get some velocity there, at least during the tournament. So that would be my buy and sell during. For my buy and sell before, I think you got to go off the map, like you say, because I think so much is already priced in. I do think there are still going to be some guys that get increases before the tournament. Josh Sargent's a good option. I think PFOC is a good option, just because if he does get named on the plane to Qatar, I think that's a big deal for him, because I think you're already getting that sort of hype for PFOC where it's, oh my God, why wasn't he in the squad? He would have made a difference if he was here. So if he gets named to the squad, I think you get a little bump there. A guy like that would be where I would be looking for sort of the quick flips and the more risky stuff. And then my buy and hold through this World Cup, I'd go a little bit off the rails on this one as well. I would go for any of the guys that are currently on the U20s that have some promise. So guys like Paxton Aronson, guys like, he doesn't have any cards yet, but Quinn Sullivan looks really good. Jack McGlynn looks like he could be really good. Kevin Paredes looks like he could be pretty good. I think those guys aren't really being looked at right now because everybody's really focusing on the World Cup squad, but the U20s team won a recent cup tournament. They looked decent in the friendlies recently and lost a cup gang, but other than that, they looked pretty good. So I'm really optimistic on the U20 squad, and I think now is probably a good time to start looking at them, especially because all the attention right now is on the main team, and it should be, considering it's a World Cup year. But when the attention is in one spot, I usually want to be somewhere else.
Have you seen, like you mentioned, some of those guys don't have cards, some of them do. Are a lot of the guys that do have cards, is it like MLS type cards and like
Yep.
stuff like
So
that?
a few of them are in the MLS Chrome sets. A few of them are in the MLS Bowman sets. Paxton Aronson has an MLS Sapphire. Slonia, who I don't think is featured for the U20s yet, but he's going to be the goalkeeper that is going to feature for the U20s and hopefully the national team going forward. He's in the Bowman set as well as the Sapphire set. So there are options for all those guys I listed. Quinn Sullivan might be the only one that doesn't, but he looks like he's going to make it onto the next MLS checklist that comes out here next month. So all those guys either have cards already or will have cards very soon. So I think it's probably a good time to start looking at them, especially if attention is somewhere else.
Got it. Nice. Cool.
Alrighty, perfect. So with that, we'll move on to one of the topics that you actually brought up when we were preparing for this, which is the grading landscape. I think it's very interesting right now where grading is at, not only with PSA, but with a few other different companies as well. So if you want to lead off on grading landscape, how you're looking at it, what you're analyzing, all that kind of stuff, let me know your thoughts on the current grading landscape that we have.
Yeah, so I think when we talked earlier, like, a month or so ago, we talked about grading with SGC for very like quick flips. You get it back in like a week, get the money out the door. PSA, I think at the time was like a few months. Although I have noticed, so my $30 PSA order took a few, like 2 months or so, a little over 2 months, and my $18 order that I sent like mid-July is already now in assembly. So again, like little over 2 months for the bulk order. And one thing I started looking into was like, okay, obviously we have these discrepancies in turnaround times and prices. What are like the resale values? And I just took some flagship cards like the Mbappe, Prism base card and like just things like that. And I was like, what is it selling for in SGC? What is it selling for in BGS? What is it selling for in PSA and CSG? And CSG, I honestly couldn't find a lot of sales for a lot of those cards. And I want to say PSA, I mean, this is straight off the top of my head, but PSA is it was somewhere in like the 1.3 to 1.5 of what SGC was for at least the few cards that I looked at. And I don't know. I mean, it's just, I struggle because I had a few cards that I sold that I got graded from SGC that frankly like sold for less than like the cost plus grading, which, part of that is obviously diligence on my part, but they were also cards that I thought I got for like pretty good deals. And it's just, I do just wonder like how much meat there is on the bone with some of the cards with like SGC specifically, especially with the $30 fee when you can grade with PSA. And I think the only difference there is you have to take a bit longer term of a game with PSA in the sense that like, okay, if you want to prospect, like buy now and get an order in and then like do that every month. And then, 3 months from now, like every month you'll have an order coming back kind of thing. So there's like a little more like ramp up time, but I don't know, like I'm definitely leaning more towards PSA right now, just because it's the company I'm most familiar with. The resale value still, speaks for itself. And outside of a few specific, like, vintage or ultra modern type cards, it seems like that's probably the way to go for even like more nearer term, like flip opportunities.
Yeah, so for a variety of reasons that you just went over, I think we're at the point now, at least as of time of recording, that PSA should be the only company that you're looking at in terms of grading. And I can go through a variety of reasons on this. In fact, I could probably do a whole video on it, but from a lot of different perspectives, I think PSA is the only shop in town right now. The first one I would go to is the fact that the PSA premium is only getting bigger as our market continues its decrease. It's no secret that the sports card market is down. There's less participants, but the participants that are in it still prefer PSA to a large extent over things like SGC, over things like BGS. And so it behooves you to continue to grade with a company that has the highest premium. Along with that, PSA is now well through its backlog, and they are now turning things around at an extremely fast rate compared to what they were previously. The $30 economy level is, or sorry, I think that's called the value level, is getting back to people based on Blowout's forum within 1 to 2 months. If you want to go with the regular, or I think it's called economy, whatever the $50 level is, it's getting back to people within 2 weeks to a month. If you go at the $18 or the $22 level now for bulk, it's taking around 2 to 3 months. With those timelines and your profit margins and the ROIs and all that kind of stuff going in your favor with going with PSA, I think you should send pretty much everything there. I don't think it makes sense anymore to use SGC. Yeah, you can get things back in a week, but you're paying more to grade it than you are at PSA when you're waiting for a 1 or a 2 month turnaround. And realistically, I don't really think there's that many things you should be grading where you need it back in a week as opposed to needing it back in a month or 2 months. So I'm full PSA all the way now until something changes. Either SGC needs to lower their pricing, which is probably the most obvious thing they can do, or PSA will get more backed up, which I actually don't see happening because I just sent a submission to them a couple days ago. The day it was marked as collected as shipment, it got checked in that night, which is tonight, and it's already in research and ID within one night. So at the front end of their processing service, it is completely gates open. They're scanning through everything. I sent a package. It got there the afternoon. It is in research and ID tonight. So they are all systems go at PSA. And what that tells me is they're not getting the cards that they think they were going to be getting when they released the bulk tiers and these lower pricing. So I think it stands to reason that not only are their turnaround times getting faster, they're going to get even more cheaper. And when that happens, I really don't see a place for these other grading companies, at least in the current market structure. So at least now I'm all systems go on PSA for a variety of reasons. And I think that's where you should be looking if you're looking at submitting cards and grading as your sort of strategy for trying to build up in the market.
Yeah, I couldn't really agree more. Just especially like you said, if they decrease prices again to like 18 or 15, then it's kind of like game over because I mean, obviously until they get too much of a backlog, but it seems like at least with everything they've communicated and like a lot of the optics that have happened while they had a backlog is that they were preparing for a large submission again, and maybe they haven't quite hit that. But what that tells me is that they are at least equipped for it. And until they get there's obviously an equilibrium there where they can continue to tick their prices down if it means they're going to get more cards sent in until they get to the point where they've reached max capacity. And yeah, I mean, it's good for the market if they aren't getting what they are at 22, because then maybe that means that 18 is a sweet spot, or maybe 16 is a sweet spot, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, with SGC, it's tough now because it's I mean, yeah, it's great to have a 5-day turnaround, but it's only relative to what the other guy's doing. So if you have a 5-day turnaround at 30, it's not as valuable against a 1-month turnaround or 2-week turnaround as it was against a 6-month to 12-month turnaround. And yeah, really until either prices change or there's a meaningful increase in resale value for the other grading services, it's just tough. And like I said, especially if it really only affects you on the front end, where if we were sending off cards today, you'd get cards back from SGC faster than PSA, but after a couple of months, you're getting cards back every month. And once you kind of get that flywheel going, then it's almost doesn't feel, I mean, not to say it doesn't make a difference, but it doesn't feel as slower than SGC at that point.
Yeah, exactly. My thing is SGC's play was really they needed to capture market share in the form of getting better secondary market performance. But unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case. The market clearly has a preference for PSA, and it's only getting bigger and bigger. Over the past 3 or 4 years, the PSA premium's just gotten bigger and bigger on things. And even now, the premium on a 10 versus a 9 is just getting bigger and bigger. 9s are trading closer to raw than they have been since the start of the boom. So PSA 10s seem to be the name of the game, at least for the ultra modern side. So it really benefits you to stick to that PSA label, at least for now. And the current market structure that we're in for grading with all these companies desperate to get cards is really, really good for us as customers, because eventually PSA is going to lower prices again because they need to be at an equilibrium, and they're just way overstaffed right now, at least in my opinion. If they're turning things around this quickly, they're clearly not getting the amount of cards that they were prepped for. So prices inevitably will be dropping over the next few months. I could see it getting as low as 15. Not that I have any insider knowledge. I just think that's probably the price point that they're going to end up at over the next few months. And that'll put pressure on literally everybody in the industry to follow suit, because they're not going to be able to compete with PSA on secondary market pricing. So they need to compete with them on turnaround times and front door pricing. And so unless SGC is coming out with a $15 level that can get back to you within a week or two, it's like you say, it's looking like it's going to be game over here within the next few months for these other companies, which is unfortunate, but perhaps they do get bought out. But yeah, it's going to be very, very tough with the amount of production power and secondary market trading that PSA has right now.
Yeah, and I wonder what that does to the resale value of our, if SGC, let's say, I mean, this is all conjecture, but if SGC, let's say, gets acquired by PSA or goes out of business, what does that do to SGC cards, right? Because there is at least some value there. It's not like they're worthless. It's all relative. But if a company goes out of business, then it's okay, what happens, I think especially like more like vintage cards, right? Where it's like, like an SGC 6 of something, it's like, okay, that's like a pretty valuable card. But then if SGC is out of business, like, do we just cross all that over to PSA and then you take like the one grade hit or whatever it is? Like, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I guess if PSA or were to acquire one of those companies, maybe there's a way to sort of, you can send it in, there's more legitimacy behind it, or more like resale value legitimacy, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record as saying I think in the future everything is going to be regraded by one giant corporation computer, and we'll all get to a finally standardized grading scale. So when that eventually works out, I think it'll actually be better once everything's standardized. But I think we are very, very far off from that end game point. But in the meantime, it'll definitely be interesting to see how things go. Alrighty, and with that, we'll move into our last section topic here. This will cover basically what to watch for in October, and I wanted to start with some of the new releases that I just looked up that were coming out. So I have it as Mosaic World Cup coming out in early October, followed by National Treasures in mid-October, and then at some point in October, we're also supposed to be getting the Bowman U21 product, as well as an MLS Chrome set. So from that list, what sort of jumps out to you as the sort of headlining products or something you would be having your eye on? And obviously NT would be one of those.
Yeah, I mean, obviously National Treasures is going to be the high end. Like, I think, I think I've heard multiple discussions, I know from you and Andre and other people, about like, there's kind of like the ultra modern market, and then there's like the high end ultra modern market. It's like two different markets. So that'll be interesting to see just what type of, whether it's rookies or just, autos and things like that are in that set. One thing I was just looking at up here, because so Panini Prism is in November. So it'll be interesting to see how the Mosaic set does. It seems like Mosaic is kind of always one of the first sets to market for a lot of releases across a lot of sports. And normally that has led to, a bit of like hype just around that set, because it's kind of like one of the first, real like Panini releases. One thing I am interested in is like the road to the World Cup versus like when Prism comes out. It's like, like how do we sort of reconcile that? Because my understanding is that like if it's road to the World Cup, they can include people like Erling Haaland and other people that are maybe not in the World Cup because they were, they participated on the road to the World Cup. And then the only other thing I would say is, with a lot of these Bowman, we talked about some of the US men's national team, U20 players. With these Bowman releases, it kind of, I mean, I'm not very well versed in like the baseball market, but it's kind of reminds me of where the baseball market is, in the sense that, it's almost like getting the guys like pre-rookie, where it's like, then at what point like does it become like which one is actually the rookie? And I know with Bowman, like obviously Bowman and Panini are, different companies, but it'll be interesting to see how like a Bowman, like first Bowman U21 card does versus like the Panini rookie that comes 4 years later in like World Cup Prism or whatever, right? Like it'll just be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, so for those that aren't super well versed in the baseball card market, Bowman Prospect Chrome is the number one baseball card prospecting product, and it's not even close. That is the Bowman on card prospect first autograph is the card for any of these ultra modern guys. Like that's the one everybody chases. That's the one you want, preferably in one of those true colors, whether that be gold, blue, refractor, that sort of thing. That's the card for these guys. So I don't know if that's going to translate into the soccer side, just because we haven't had a Bowman U20 anything product before. So I'm really interested in it. Unfortunately, on the sell sheet, it looks like they're going to be sticker autos, which is something that is not in the baseball side. Everything's on card. So I think that if it is ending up being sticker, I think that holds it back a bit, at least in my opinion. I'm a guy that really hates sticker autos, but I'm sure they'll still be valued. It's just a question of where they fall in that rookie tiers list, like you mentioned. If they were on card, I'd be a lot more bullish on it, but seeing as they're probably going to be sticker, I'll wait and see with that. But I'm very, very interested to see what the checklist is, because I really have no idea where they're going to go with it. Are they going to fill it with U21 guys that we've seen in a bunch of other products, or are they really going to go hunting and literally give you every U21 player for all these different rosters that are going to be in the Euro coming up? So that could be really, really interesting. I hope they go really deep with it and we get a Merlin style checklist where even better than Merlin, we get 50 or 60 guys that are in no other products. I think that'd be awesome. We need a product like that, in my opinion, for soccer. So I think that'd be great if they nail the checklist. NT, like you said, checklist is going to be really, really cool on that as well, because we have a chance to get first NTs for Mbappe. We know he's in the set because Panini released it in an article. I bet they get Haaland in the set in some capacity. I don't know what his autograph situation is. He may not have a deal with Panini, but I'm sure he has cards in there. I'm interested to see if they do stickers or patch worn material or anything like that. I have a feeling they won't, just because they've gotten lazy, but we'll go ahead and see. I'm sure the pricing on it will be insane. No matter if they're game used, match worn, or picked up at Dick's Sporting Goods, people love a high end product. So I imagine that'll put up some pretty crazy numbers, especially on the guys that weren't in previous years. And then with Mosaic, like you said, it's just a matter of what happens to that set after the World Cup, right? Is this road to the World Cup stuff going to carry value like Prism will? I don't really know, but in the meantime, for this month period or so that we have it, there's a chance you can get that graded by PSA and in slabs by the time the World Cup comes around, unlike with Prism World Cup, which is going to come out in November. So perhaps there's a play to be made there on some of the lower number parallels. And for some of the guys, I imagine they snuck in a few rookies in that set. It wouldn't surprise me if Felix Afena-Guillen got in for Ghana. It wouldn't surprise me if Julian Alvarez got in for Argentina. We know Pepe's in it from the pictures, even though Pepe already has a million cards. So depending on the checklist, again, it could be a potential play. I am worried about what happens to that when Prism comes out, but in the meantime, it's definitely going to be interesting. And I think some of the unique parallels, like Genesis, like the really eye-appealing low-numbered ones like that, I think are possibly something to be looking into. But yeah, that would sum up my thoughts on those three sets. And then MLS Chrome, like I said, depending on the checklist, there could be some guys that are getting their first cards and could be some US men's national team players down the line. So give it a look when the checklist comes out. I know I definitely will be. So I'm sure some other people will as well. But that probably sums up my thoughts on those products. And with that, we'll go ahead and move into the final topic here, which is what to watch for, not in terms of product, but in terms of performance and what we have going on in October. Now, obviously, Champions League is making a comeback. We're just going to be within, by the end of October, 20 something days of the World Cup. So players are going to be tuning up for that as well as playing actual games. So what are your thoughts on this next window of performance? I feel like this could be very, very key in setting up who the hyped guys are going into the World Cup.
Yeah, I agree. I think between, Champions League performance, obviously you don't want injuries, but, if somebody gets injured and then they're out of the World Cup, for example, that obviously could factor in. And then, I think the closer we get to the World Cup, the more buzz and more hype. And, I think you mentioned in your video, more people watch a World Cup match than the Super Bowl. And it is hard, I think, especially for Americans who aren't into soccer, to really grasp it. But just anecdotally, I remember watching like the 2014 World Cup with just buddies, like going to a bar. And it was, I've never seen lines like that for any sporting event ever in my life. Than watching like the US play Portugal at like 11 a.m. on a Sunday or whatever it was. Like
the US England game this year, depending on if we get blown out by Wales, I think it's a different story. But assuming we draw or win against Wales, that match will be probably the most watched soccer match in the United States ever.
It's the day after Thanksgiving, right?
Yep.
Like it's a national holiday. Everyone's going to be at home, either with their families, or at least, most people won't be at work, or if they do work, likely can, probably take off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be like the Super Bowl, except it happens once every 4 years. And there's all this hype. Even people who don't really know about soccer, I think, know about like, oh, aren't we supposed to be good this year? And like,
yes,
that may or may not be true, but I think that's like the general sentiment across sort of like the average like American sports fan.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point. So us that are really in the weeds on the US men's national team, and we watch everything, we watch friendlies, like we're degenerates for watching that. Like we're watching games that don't even count. So the general public that's going to be watching these World Cup matches, they don't even know about these friendlies that are happening. They can maybe name Christian Pulisic, but like you said, the thought around the team is, hey, we're supposed to be pretty good this year, aren't we? And I'm sure everyone will be watching the game in England, game against England. I don't think they'll be able to name more than one or two players on the team, but those are the type of casuals that if the team does really well, really could capture some interest in this upcoming run.
Yeah, all it's going to take is, a win against Wales, a win against, like, the fire will explode, like it'll explode with one or two results. Like it'll get kind of crazy, I think. And so it's exciting, but it's also, my expectations are quite tempered.
Yeah, I think everyone's expectations got very, very tempered very, very quickly from these friendly matches that just took place. The team doesn't look like it's going to ever score a goal again, so that's never a good thing. But hopefully things change going into November. Everyone gets back healthy. I saw today that Anthony Robinson was back in a training for Fulham. Obviously, he appears to be one of the super key members of the squad, seeing as we don't really have a lot of guys that can do what he does on the pitch. Yunus Musa, we obviously need him back healthy as well. But I think what we've learned from the friendly matches is just how thin we are behind our top guys. So I think, like you say, this upcoming month of October, for not just the United States men's national team, but for all the national teams out there, the most important thing for this next few months is to be healthy and to get your main guys back, because we see just how quickly things can change if guys aren't out. And for sure, just based on pure odds, there are going to be some key players that miss World Cup matches. And that's just going to be super unfortunate, but it is just a matter of odds. I'm sure somebody's going to miss some matches.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for soccer fans and, even casual fans, it's an exciting couple of months because you have some Champions League matches, and then you basically have this like break for the World Cup, which is just an action-packed, a month plus of soccer that basically leads right into the holidays. Then we come back in January and it's like full throttle again. So
yeah, this is the best time of year of like the past 4 years. This is the best time to be a soccer fan. Like, well, I don't know what more you could ask for. We have Champions League coming back online in a shortened window. We're going to have 1 million Europa League matches. If you get that deep, you can watch a bunch of Europa League. And then right after that, we have the World Cup coming up. And while the expectations are going to be tempered, I don't think that's going to stop any of us for tuning into literally every single second of every single pregame of every single match that happens in Qatar. Whether we look terrible against Wales or whether we come out on fire against Wales, we're going to, unfortunately or fortunately, be watching every single second of it.
Oh yeah, I'm going to listen to all the pre-podcasts. I'm going to listen to all the reaction podcasts. Like, it's just going to be, I mean, it's, I'll say this, like 2014, I think the team probably kind of exceeded expectations.
Yes.
Obviously 2018 was a disaster in the sense that it didn't even happen because we were that bad. And there's obviously a lot of expectations with this group. I think most people who are more in the weeds are probably looking out to 2026 more than 2022. But it is cool to have this excitement around the U.S. men's soccer team, and whether it results in any sort of, successful outcome is to be seen. But even just having like that little bit of hope and knowing like, okay, we're going to play some good teams. We're going to play England, who's one of the favorites. And obviously, it's sort of a poetic, like U.S. and England day after Thanksgiving. You can't write it, much better. It'll be fun. I mean, it's just fun to have that to look forward to. And if we get thrashed, then we'll have another 4-year cycle to look forward to the next one.
And the hype will rebuild again, and we will have a whole group of new players, and we will start the hype cycle all over. Because, like I said earlier, there is always something else. There is always another guy. So no matter what happens in October, November, in the World Cup, there's always going to be something else on the horizon. So just keep an eye out for it. Remember that these moments, they happen and they feel like they're going to stay with us forever, but things will pass and you may miss an opportunity on one guy, but there's going to be opportunities on many, many more guys. So I guess I will leave the podcast with that note here. Thank you guys so much for joining the Fireside Chat here with Seth. Have a sign off for any of the folks listening in. Go ahead. Let me know what your final thoughts are here.
Thanks again for having me on. Always psyched to talk about this stuff. If you guys want to check out Soccer Card Corner, would love to have you over there. And yeah, just looking forward to all the upcoming, soccer madness and to see how that impacts the soccer card market.
Yep, definitely. Let's make sure we try and do this again in October, and we'll have a whole new list of updates. Hopefully the US men's national team is all healthy as we go into the World Cup, and all that excitement is restored, as opposed to now where it's more doom and gloom and, oh no, what are we getting ourselves into here? So I thank you so much for coming on here, Seth, and obviously everybody go check out his channel. He does great content. And with that, thank you guys so much. Feel free to leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, shoot me a DM on Instagram, all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys in the next video.